Carmilla, Chapter 15 Ordeal and Execution. As he spoke, one of the strangest looking men I ever beheld entered the chapel, at the door through which Carmilla had made her entrance and her exit. He was tall, narrow-chested, stooping with high shoulders, and dressed all in black. His face was brown and dried in with deep furrows. He wore an oddly shaped hat with a broad leaf. His hair, long and grizzled, hung on his shoulders. He wore a pair of golden spectacles, and walked very slowly, with an odd shambling gait. With his face sometimes turned up to the sky, and sometimes bowed down towards the ground, he seemed to wear a perpetual smile, his long, thin arms swinging, and his lank hands, in old black gloves, ever so much too wide for them, waving and gesticulating in utter abstraction. "The very man!" exclaimed the general, advancing with manifest delight. "My dear Baron, how happy I am to see you! I had no hope of meeting you so soon." He signed to my father, who had by this time returned, and leading the fantastic old gentleman, whom he called the Baron, to meet him. He introduced him formally, and they at once entered into earnest conversation. The stranger took a roll of paper from his pocket, and spread it on the worn surface of a tomb that stood by. He had a pencil case in his fingers, with which he traced imaginary lines from point to point on the paper, which from their often glancing together at certain points of the building, I concluded to be a plan of the chapel. He accompanied, which I may term, his lecture, with occasional readings from a dirty little book, whose yellow leaves were closely written over. They sauntered together down the side aisle, opposite to the spot where I was standing, conversing as they went, and when they began measuring distances by paces, and finally they all stood together, facing a piece of the side wall, which they began to examine with great minuteness, pulling off the ivy that clung over it, and rapping the plaster with the ends of their sticks, scraping here, knocking there. At length they ascertained the existence of a broad marble tablet, with letters carved in relief upon it. With the assistance of the woodman, who soon returned, a monumental inscription and carved escutcheon was disclosed. They proved to be those of the long-lost monument of Mikarla, Countess Karnstein. The old general, though not, I fear, given to the praying mood, raised his hands and eyes to heaven in mute thanksgiving for some moments. "Tomorrow," I heard him say, "the commissioner will be here, and the inquisition will be held according to law." Then, turning to the old man with the gold spectacles, whom I have described, he shook him warmly by both hands and said, "Baron, how can I thank you? How can we all thank you? You will have delivered this region from a plague that has scourged its inhabitants for more than a century. The horrible enemy, thank God, is at last tracked." My father led the stranger aside, and the general followed. I know that he had led him out of hearing, that he might relate my case, and I saw them glance often quickly at me, as the discussion proceeded. My father came to me, kissed me again and again, and leading me from the chapel said, "It is time to return, but before we go home we must add to our party the good priest, who lives but a little way from this, and persuade him to accompany us to the slosh." In this quest we were successful, and I was glad, being unspeakably fatigued when we reached home. But my satisfaction was changed to dismay on discovering that there were no tidings of Carmilla. Of the scene that had occurred in the ruined chapel, no explanation was offered, and it was clear that it was a secret which my father, for the present, determined to keep from me. The sinister absence of Carmilla made the remembrance of the scene more horrible to me. The arrangements for the night were singular. 2 servants and Madame were to sit up in my room that night, and the ecclesiastic with my father kept watch in the adjoining dressing-room. The priest had performed certain solemn rites that night, the purpose of which I did not quite understand, any more than I comprehended the reason for this extraordinary precaution taken for my safety during sleep. I saw all clearly a few days later. The disappearance of Carmilla was followed by the discontinuance of my nightly sufferings. You have heard, no doubt, of the appalling superstition that prevails in Upper and Lower Styria, in Moravia, Silesia, and Turkish Serbia, Poland, even in Russia, the superstition, so we must call it, of the vampire. If human testimony, taken with every care and solemnity, judicially, before commission innumerable, each consisting of many members, all chosen for integrity and intelligence, and constituting reports more voluminous, perhaps, than exist upon any other class of cases, is worth anything, it is difficult to deny or even to doubt the existence of such a phenomenon as the vampire. From our part, I have heard no theory by which to explain what I myself have witnessed and experienced, other than that supplied by the ancient and well-attested belief of the country. The next day the formal proceedings took place in the chapel of Karnstein. The grave of the Countess Makarla was opened, and the general and my father recognized each his perfidious and beautiful guest, in the face now disclosed to view. The features, though 150 years had passed since her funeral, were tinted with the warmth of life. Her eyes were open, no cadaverous smell exhaled from the coffin. The two medical men, one officially present, the other on the part of the promoter of the inquiry, attested the marvelous fact that there was a faint but appreciate respiration and a corresponding action of the heart. The limbs were quite perfectly flexible, the flesh elastic, and the leaden coffin floated with blood, in which to a depth of 7 inches the body lay immersed. Here, then, were all the admitted signs and proofs of vampirism. The body, therefore, in accordance with the ancient practice, was raised, and a sharp stake driven through the heart, who uttered a piercing shriek and cry at the moment, in all respects such as might escape from a living person in their last agony. Then her head was struck off, and a torrent of blood flowed from the severed neck. The body and head were next placed on a pile of wood, and reduced to ashes, which were thrown upon the river and borne away. And that territory has never since been plagued by the visits of a vampire. My father has a copy of the report of the Imperial Commission, with the signature of all who were present of these proceedings, attached in verification of the statement. It is from this official paper that I have surmised my account of this last quite shocking scene.